There's a lot of mechanics in TF2 that are simply not fun to fight against. You've got quickscope headshots, aka, random bursts of skill, and the mere existence of weapons like the Wrangler. If this all sounds like a broken record on loop, it's because a friend of mine, Unusual Sandwich, started a video of his off with that same bit of script that I just shamelessly stole. Borrowed. That paragraph was taken from his video on Does Pyro Actually Need Airblast experiment, a project that took him a lot of time, effort, and killed off brain cells, that ended in a fantastic video that I'd recommend you'd go watch. I won't spoil anything since his video was so good and I actually want you to go watch it, but I had a silly question as I was getting over being sick this past weekend, and it went something like, does Pyro need fire? And that's how all the best ideas start. So the main idea of this is that as a Pyro, I cannot use any form of fire. Anything that applies Afterburn is off the list. However, only the functions of said weapon that deal Afterburn. So no primary fire on flamethrowers, no flare guns, and unfortunately, no sharpened volcano fragment. I know, it's a dark day. I'm going to structure this similarly to Sandwich's video, but instead of spending 2 weeks playing this godforsaken playstyle, I instead decided I'd play it for only 1 week, because I am trying to stick to a bi-weekly upload schedule, which was thrown off by a week of night shifts and a week of sick, and now I'm not even doing that anymore. Immediately on day 1, I knew I'd have to come up with some strategy regarding this stupid, dumb strategy that I'm having, and here's what I came up with. Firstly, our weapons of choice are going to be very limited, but beginning with our primary, stock for airblast heavy playstyles, and degreaser for combo pyro. Dragon's Fury wouldn't be that good because it takes forever to repressurize the airblast, and Backburner has about as much loaded into it as my enemies whenever I pull out the shotgun and start blasting. Flog is obviously going to be the worst since its charge only it charges on fire damage dealt, and even then it has no airblast, so it's really pathetic. For our secondaries, we are basically left with the 3 shotguns, the Man Melter, and the Thrusty. I went with the Panic Attack on day 1 because I love this form of combo pyro, and it isn't affected by random bullet spread. But don't worry, I'll be sure to play with a little bit of everything in this experiment. Finally, like I mentioned earlier, every melee except the sharpened volcano fragment is able to be used, so my go-tos this first day are the Power Jack and the Homewrecker. Some great options for pyro just in general. Day 1 strategies pretty much revolved around 2 things: air blasting people off cliffs and attempting to deflect rockets. See, one problem with this is that I cannot deflect as pyro. I suck at it. As such, it becomes a struggle when that's the best DPS I have, as the Panic Attack is a good softening tool and can be a good DPS tool, but not always. In fact, I often had the best time with my melee weapon. Oh, and random crits, of course. I knew that this playstyle was going to test my limits as Pyro, but the thing I didn't know would be a problem was spies. It turns out if spies can get away with basic shenanigans with little to no punishment, they'll do it. If you can't use fire, they'll take advantage of that. If you don't have Homewrecker, your engineers will be bullied, and if your team isn't spy checking, well, listen, I get it. At any time, I could flip the switch that sends me into full-on pyromania, but this is a challenge and an experiment for a reason. But it is hilarious when spies run up attempting to backstab you, only for you to send them flying to their doom with the well-placed air blast. Yeah, dead ring out of that, fucko! Hi, this is Future Libra, just writing to say the language there was indeed discriminatory against Dead Ringer spies. And if YouTube demonetizes this video when I don't even get money for making videos for said discriminatory language, it was worth it. Unfortunately, though, that was all I was able to do for day 1. I was still really sick and looked like an Andrew WK album cover, so I couldn't keep it up and had to get some rest. Starting on day 2, I realized how much I was going to rely on airblast as a feature, so I decided after a few warm-up matches using the stock shotgun that I'd go ahead and join Dust Bowl for a little bit, and it went about as well as I could have hoped. Needless to say, I was starting to get the hang of air blasting projectiles. I still wasn't good by any means, but it's a marked improvement over literally not knowing how to. Like, sure, the air blast hitbox is big, but at the same time, it's invisible. so I don't actually know where or when to airblast. It's just something I have to sit there and figure out as I do this challenge. I also had a few games where I was able to get some footage for some melee weapons, notably the 3rd degree and back scratcher. The 3rd degree, I just happened to get a kill on a scout who was gravely wounded while he was in the loving embrace of his team's medic, and for some context in this challenge, using the thermal thruster will end up causing Pyro to be an all melee class with the exception of airblast. So pairing that with the back scratcher led to... Other than that, random bullet spread on the stock shotgun is pain. Sometimes your crosshair will be right on top of an enemy sniper, and if you shoot them once, you will get a kill on them. But hey, funny thing about that, did you know your pellets can make a cartoon outline of the enemy you're shooting at? Now, looking back at my footage on Dust Bowl, I could tell one thing about me and airblast. I was airblasting way too late. Some of these clips you can see it looks like I'm trying to play the penis game with the rockets and are failing on the first round, letting them get way too close to me. As such, I knew I had to change the way I think of airblast working, trying to deflect projectiles at a much longer range. Day 3 went much better than days 1 and 2. After discovering that I was airblasting projectiles incorrectly, it meant that I was able to do much better by extending my imagined range. However, it was also at this time that I came to realize how limiting this playstyle really is. While Flame-only Pyro is a playstyle that is highly offensive with little to no defensive options, Flameless Pyro is a playstyle that is highly defensive with little to no offensive options. I mean, there were times where I wanted to go WM1 into a group of enemies on the cart. I could deal so much damage to them all. I really could, but all I could do is sit back or try and airblast them off the cart while they all just sit there pushing it up the hill slowly. And heck, spies are also annoying because when they go invisible, you can technically track them if you're good enough, but it'd be so much easier if I could just... Yeah! Getting back on track after that bit of relapse, I will admit this playstyle does work well with flanking strats, where players just don't know you exist, but as a wise man once said,
come to think of it, every class in the game would perform better if their opponents were always turned away doing other things.
It's even funnier when you get random crits, the ultimate in comedy. This flanking playstyle though would have been so much better if I could just use my fire for once. Like, being limited to the shotgun and melee, sure, it makes you better at dealing burst DPS with a shotgun, but it doesn't beat the consistency of the primary flamethrower at any major point. Tomorrow I'll be mixing things up, I think, and trying a different combination of weapons. Not that there's a lot of combos that aren't exceedingly situational. Okay, so not a lot actually happened this day. Mostly a lot of the same, just wishing I could go back to using fire. But today I did manage to get 2 weapons off the checklist in terms of weapons I needed to use. The last shotgun, the reserve shooter, being the first. Hate it or hate it, this weapon on Pyro is extremely... I wouldn't call it useless, but it is heavily handicapped compared to the soldier's use of it, since Pyro basically has to wait for someone to blast jump in order to deal mini crits. Or sometimes you might just get lucky and a target of yours just happen to be popped up by a friendly explosive class. The second weapon I decided to get footage for would require very specific maps to play on, but I knew of only one that would allow for such stupidity to go borderline unpunished for a near eternity. Listen, y'all already know what this thing does. It crits while a target is wet. So I'm going to show you the only clip of Pyro Shark you need to see to understand what this weapon is like. Yeah, day 5 was more of the same, not much to speak of.
I don't know if you're gonna get this, but time's been ticking away. Listen, it's been a whole week, and frankly, being off the grid for that long is gonna make people worry. So, what's the holdup?
Have you ever dreamt of something so beautiful as your enemies collapsed in a singed pile of charred flesh on the floor as a spy burning to death for daring to attempt to play the game and have some semblance of fun, or to witness the tears of your enemies as you walk into them while watching those tears evaporate and their faces turn from fear to ash and their corpses stack up in smoldering glory.
Well, take a break then. It ain't healthy to burn out doing stupid things like this. Trust me, I would know. Sometimes you just gotta do something else and then return once you're able to do it without contemplating jumping into the local river. Yeah, that wouldn't be fun.
You know what? I think Sandwich was right. I've been playing a lot of TF2 lately. More than ever before, and I am going on my 4th month of playing this game in a row now. A new record for me since first playing this game way back in 2012. It's time for me to take a break. However, not all of that was for naught, as I did have some interesting findings when it came to playing this silly playstyle that could be considered a subclass. Pyro is a perfectly balanced class between offensive and defensive options. Yeah, as I brought up earlier, Flameless Pyro really reveals how much stronger you are when you can use that fire, and not using utility abilities like airblast reveals how limited you are to dealing said damage with that playstyle. So the fact that Pyro is capable of perfectly balancing both offensive and defensive options means a lot to his specific playstyle. If you want to play offensively, you can do that. Go wild, WM1 into enemies to your heart's content, and if you want to play defensively, that is also a completely valid option. This is why I would say Pyro is the perfect jack-of-all-trades class. If you want a class that can do a little bit of everything, there really isn't a better option out there than, well, Pyro. But hey, I guess all this talk about Flameless Pyro means I'm experiencing a form of, burnout. No, but seriously, I've been playing this game for about 4 months straight, as mentioned earlier, and me personally, I am not someone who can play one game forever. It just isn't my style. So at this current point in time, I am going to be cutting back on TF2 content. I know, how dare I, but trust me, I got some ideas for content that I really want to do in the near future, and some games I really want to make videos on. I've always considered myself a bit of a variety YouTuber, but as of recent, TF2 has been the only thing I've played, purely so I can see how many views I can get from it. I do appreciate all the attention I got from those TF2 videos. It's seriously insane, and I may go back to playing it someday in the future, but as for right now, I must simply say that I'm going to be focusing on variety content once again. And if you don't like it,